special benefit, and we're helping those individuals with that personal homemaker benefit. We're also going to start taking the VA clients and passport clients, but we're kind of have a waiting list for that because we're not done getting the final approval for that. But I put a postcard on the back too, which has another list of our services, and that has our Solon number, or the front has our Beechwood number, and it all goes the same place. So if you ever need anything, just give us a call, and thank you so much for coming today. We're so happy to be out here and enjoy. Oh, I'm sorry.
So I can't work too fast. So you just serve Solon and Beechwood. You don't go.
Oh no, we go the whole east side, and
Well, do you go south, like Hudson, Summit County?
we're not able to. That would be our Fairlawn office.
Okay.
But yeah, if you just Google Home Watch Fairlawn, you can
Oh,
get their
there's
number.
the company does service.
It's not our company, it's a different franchise owner, but
Okay,
it's,
okay.
it's still Home Watch Caregivers with all the,
Okay.
principles and values and so forth. Uh-huh.
Does Medicare cover these services at all?
No, the only thing is if you have a Medicare Advantage plan called, with Anthem, and you sign up for their personal homemaker. This is a huge step because Medicare never pays for any of this stuff except for the skilled care, which we call the physical therapy, occupational therapy, and nursing when you get out of the hospital or a rehab. But they've never paid for the private, caregiving. So this Anthem thing is a huge step, as well as if you have long-term care insurance, if you happen to buy one of those Genworth or, can't think of the names now, but many years ago, we have clients that get 24 hours care at home because they have one of those policies, paid for. And then the VA, that aid in attendance is a nice benefit if your retirement, isn't more than a certain amount. It's like $127,000. If you don't have more than that in your retirement, you can qualify that if you're a veteran or the spouse of a veteran. Did you have another question?
No, it's the same.
Okay. Anything else? All right. Thank you so much. Enjoy.
Yes, and thanks for sponsoring, Nancy.
Sure. No problem.
So thanks for coming today. I know this is difficult times and difficult conditions, so we're all doing the best we can do to keep some sense of normalcy. So what I didn't realize until COVID came was how much I realized on looking at people's lips to understand what they were saying. I never realized that I did that to what a degree. So if you're having trouble understanding what I'm saying, don't feel shy about asking me to repeat or raise my voice or anything that we need to do. So we want to, like I said, try to keep things going as best we can during this. So this is a really fun class. I'm an avid gardener. I learned it from my mother. To me, it's like meditation, gardening, and it's also like artwork because it's different every year since we live in a 4-season climate. Our annuals come and go. Perennials stick around, but our annuals come and go. And to me, that's kind of fun. Getting the ability to make a different palette or a different design arrangement each year. So these are going to be some tools and tips that you can use. Some of these, if you've done any gardening, you probably already know, but some are fun and different. And then we're going to actually plant this planter that the Solon Senior Center is going to get to keep here. So you'll get to see the fruits of your labor growing, and these are all fall plants, so we should still get some nice blooming from these guys. So one of the really nice benefits of container, lots of benefits, but one of them is versatility. So in-ground planting, you kind of put it there and it stays. Yes, you can move plants around. It's a little more difficult, whereas with container gardening, you can push and pull and move them around. You can more easily dig up one plant that's not working in that container and put it in with another. So just much easier to change locations and be versatile. That's one of the biggest benefits is the ease. So I'll read that. Is anybody having trouble seeing this? Is everybody having trouble seeing it? Okay, sorry. Okay. So basically everything that I'm saying is just being added to over here. So these are all the benefits. So versatility is one benefit. Ease is another benefit. Containers are much easier to plant and to maintain than in-ground gardens. I mean, how many of us have spent, a couple hours in the garden? We're kneeling on the kneeling pad. We go to get up, and it's like, oh, geez, I don't know if I can get up. So luckily with the containers, you can fill them at waist height. You can keep them at waist height up on your deck railing or a table or up on a plant stand. So it's much easier on the body. and not having to build big garden beds and maintain big garden beds. So, and it's just easier to move around. So, also watering is much easier. We can use the watering can instead of the cumbersome hoses. I don't know, I haven't found a hose that I really love and would endorse. They do their job though, which is great. And then also weeding. We end up with much fewer weeds in container gardens than in-ground gardens. And that was a big lesson for me when I first started gardening 10 years ago or so. I was like, oh, I'll just plant a garden, because my whole front yard was grass. I thought, well, I'll just start pulling up the grass and put in a garden. It'll be much less work. No, there's less mowing, but there's more time spent in, especially weeding, a lot of weeding. And then deadheading is something that we'll have to do, but that's much easier to do with containers than in-ground. So ease is a really good perk. Variety, you can get the same variety as you can get with in-ground. Something you can even do root vegetables in deeper planters, and even small trees. So when you get into bigger things, bigger trees, then those definitely have to go in the ground. But most things that you could plant in the ground, you could also do in containers. And then creativity is lots of fun too. Like I was saying earlier, you get to start over each year, each spring. And that's a time when I don't know about you, but like my natural creative juices get flowing in the spring. Winter's kind of the time of hibernation and thinking and planning, but then when the warm weather comes around, it kind of gives us that burst of energy to get out there and be creative. So lots of fun. And then it can also help with health. Planting fresh vegetables, if you want to do, like some people like to do organics. But you can't always be certain, unless you have your soil around you tested, you can't always be certain what kinds of chemicals might be in there. Sometimes just car exhaust, things like that. So by starting vegetables in containers with fresh soil can really be better for the plants and also better for your health as well. So when it comes to choosing containers, pretty much anything that can be filled with dirt could be a container. So, we go to the store and we get the pots that are for that, but you can also be really creative with what you use to be a planter, and also if you're on a budget, which a lot of us are, lots of different ideas. So I know you can't see lots of these, but up in the upper left corner, somebody actually took an old dresser, painted it like an aqua blue, lined it with plastic. He pulled out the drawers, lined it with plastic. So the bottom, there's two drawers. The bottom drawer they pulled out a little further. The upper drawer just maybe halfway out. So they have some bigger plants in the bottom and some smaller plants in the top. So that's a really cute idea. Then here is a pair of kids' wagons. So, go to garage sale. Well, when we can have garage sales, I guess, again. I did see an ad yesterday for somebody who was doing a socially distanced yard sale. So people are starting to do them.
I have a comment. I found an old wagon, and my husband drilled some holes in the bottom, put dirt and put flowers in it. It was too shallow.
Okay.
The flowers did not do up. So now, I took all the dirt out and I just put 3 pots in there, and it looks great.
Yeah, that's a great idea, and that would be my suggestion. You're right, because wagons are often just about this deep, which isn't quite deep enough for anything bigger than just
Right.
a little plant. But yeah, I think that's what these folks have. I don't know. Looks like they have the plants right in there, but that would be a good suggestion to do it that way. Yep. And then here over on the right-hand side, it looks like somebody took some old paint cans and painted them. This looks like maybe this was maybe for a wedding. One of them's painted pink, and they have some little features that looks like a woman. Another one painted blue. Tie on it looks like a man. So you can really get creative with that. One thing to remember though, like with the wagon and the paint cans, those things can rust. So oftentimes it's good to line those with a plastic liner. If you're just using it for one season, it will probably be fine. But if you want to use it over and over again, then it's good to keep your plant in a plastic pot inside of the metal container. Same thing with wood. I saw some really cute, they look like little barrels kind of at Home Depot, the wooden slats, and then it had a metal strap around it. It was like the kind of country style. It was really cute. but make sure some of those already will come with a liner, either a plastic liner, and if it doesn't, you want to put a pot inside of that. So
I've seen a lot of wine barrels too. My daughter-in-law works at a winery out in California, and so they have the empty barrels, you know, that
Okay.
they use for that stuff.
Yep, pretty much. Like I said, anything that'll hold dirt could be a container. This one's really cute. This bottom left, somebody took a bunch of old rubber boots, rain boots, with different cute patterns on them, and they looks like they nailed them to a fence. They probably drilled. That's the other thing. You're going to need drainage holes in whatever you use. So often, if you're repurposing something, probably doesn't have drainage holes in it, so you're going to want to drill the bottom for drainage holes. So, you know, drill or poke using like a ice pick or something through the bottom of a rubber boot, and they just kind of probably heavy staples to the fence, and then filled each one of them with dirt and put little cute flowers in them. So that's nice. This one I thought was ingenious, an old colander or strainer, those old metal kitchen strainers. That's already got your holes right there. And they painted it a bright red on the outside and put some, looks like they've got vegetables growing in there, basil and some tomatoes. So the tomatoes pick up on that red color of the colander, so that's a real cute idea. And then over on the bottom right, looks like some old-fashioned tins, like there's a tea, looks like something that had some tea in it. So different food containers, if you find something that has a real cute label, then you can use that too. So that's really neat ways to get creative. So just some tips, general tips on container gardening. Take advantage of the fact that it can be much easier on your back and your body. So try to plan out where you want your containers to go before you fill them, because it's much easier to move them when they're empty than when they're full. So especially if you have a heavier pot like a ceramic pot or something like that. So try to put it somewhere first, and then we'll talk about all the different stages, and we'll demonstrate too. Oh, did you find them, Sally? Great.
Yes.
Okay. And then try to start, I know in the spring, I am so guilty of this, of going out and I'm like, oh, I want this, and I want this, and I want this, and next thing you know, I brought 40 plants home, and you got to get them in the ground fairly quickly. After you get a week or two, they'll probably be fine, but you don't want them to get root bound, which is where if they stay in the container for too long, the roots just start to wind around underneath, and then you have to be sure if that happens before you put them in the dirt to kind of loosen that a little bit so that the roots will start growing away from it instead of continuing to wind around it. And then just check in with the weight of the containers that you're using. I mean, there's a lot of really, really beautiful glazed ceramic pots out there. It's just hard to beat that, you know, with some of these plastic ones. And these do fine. But the glazed pots are really beautiful, but those tend to be the heaviest ones. And then just note that things like terracotta pots, which are those typical red clay pots, those standard ones that we see everywhere that are pretty affordable, those, because that's clay, that tends to absorb the moisture that you pour into the plant to water it. So those tend to dry out a lot more quickly than some other pots, like the plastic pots tend to hold the moisture in. So just check in with that, and then placing them up on like we said, porch railings or tables or plant stands just make them easier for weeding, for deadheading, things like that. And that to me is one of the biggest benefits of container versus in-ground gardens, is being able to reach everything, first of all, very easily, and then not having to bend over. So good stuff. Then another little tip that you might want to do is consider checking with your budget. So starting from seed is the least expensive way to go, but you have to be patient. You have to start early. You have to remember to start early. And different seeds have different germination periods. So you have to read the back of the packet to see when it's going to start. Germination means when you're going to start seeing that little sprout come up through the soil. So that's the least expensive way to go, is to start from seed, but you do have to be patient. And then different seeds can be very picky. You know, you get into like the growing lights and the different things like that for some of the more tender, more exotic types of plants. So the next least expensive way to go is the smaller plants from the garden center. Sometimes I know up by me, our local, our nature center has a plant sale every year, and the plants tend to be less expensive than the garden centers. And then, you know, the fully more mature plants. The more mature plants have impact right away. So it just depends on how patient you are and how much time you have. So you probably know that you need to pay attention. Oh, and varying stages, that's another thing. If you're starting from seed, that's another advantage of something that you can do. Is you start your seeds, one batch of your seeds, and let them start to grow, and then wait a little while, start another batch, and then so that you can have different, when you put them out in the pots, as they're still starting to grow before they bloom, you'll get some interest that way. You'll have little teeny ones just starting, have a little bit bigger ones, a little bit bigger ones. So that's a good way to make it in very, very early spring to make it very interesting too. So the hardiness zone map. So y'all probably know that the USDA divides all the regions of the United States into numbered zones. And
Excuse me, can they follow on their packets too with you, or is that not what you have?
yeah, so
The container gardening, is that what you're on now, or?
container gardening is the handout that we're on now. Yeah.
You want mine?
Oh,
No. You got two of them? I don't think so.
Yeah.
She didn't get any.
I know.
Oh,
Okay.
okay. Follow on.
So does
I was like,
everybody have
Here,
one that
I'm
just says
sorry.
container
That's
gardening?
okay.
Okay, that's what we're talking about
Okay,
now.
here's how it goes.
So I'm going through this. So we're on the hardiness zones part of our container gardening handout. So in 2002, for the first time, I think ever, the USDA actually redid all of the zones because of global warming. So all the zones got warmer. And so Solon is in, part of it's in one, part of it's in the other, in the 5B and 6A zone. But generally that's not a real concern. Usually anything that grows in 5 will grow in 6 usually. And so you have to really be most concerned with that if you're buying plants online or if you're starting from seed. Any plants that are being sold in your local garden center will be for this zone. The caveat to that is that if it's an annual, it's for a warmer zone and it's going to die, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. So do check that if you're ordering online or if you're starting from seed, make sure it's in our zone 5B or 6A. So the first thing that we're going to do when you are going to start to plant is to choose containers, and there's different things to think about when you're choosing a container. The first thing is the function. So number one should be whether or not it has drainage holes in the bottom. So for some reason, this plastic pot that I got yesterday, I'll just show you in case you run into this. It had little divots in the bottom, but they weren't punched out, so there were holes in this. So I had an old-fashioned ice pick that I just kind of stuck into those plastic divots and punched them out, so that now we have drainage holes. So just check that. You can also drill drainage holes if you have, just a regular, like one of those DeWalt drills. You can drill. The exception to that is anything that's ceramic or stone. You have to be really careful about drilling that because those can shatter. So if you're buying a plastic or stone pot, make sure it already has one or more drainage holes in it. But plastic pots, any metal pots, you can drill holes in the bottoms of those. So make sure that you have the holes. Also know that if you buy plastic pots, beware of the quality of things that you might get at like places like the dollar store or Walmart. If they're very, very thin, then you might get a year out of it or maybe 2, but they tend to deteriorate pretty quickly because they're exposed on both, they're exposed to the soil on one side and rain and such on the other side. So, and then wooden containers, we mentioned wood. There are some types of wood that are made for outdoor use. So, people who build wood decks that don't get stained or preserved would be like teak or cedar or redwood. So those kinds of wooden containers will last real well. They're very expensive, but they're an investment. They're something that will last for a long, long time. So those work. Any other kinds of like pressure treated wood, like usually the wood that people build fences out of that kind of weathers to that gray is called pressure treated wood. That is treated with chemicals to keep it from rotting. So it might be okay for flowering plants, but I wouldn't use it for anything edible because you don't want those chemicals leaching into the soil. So just check what kind of wood it is if you're using a wood container. So then you'll want to have a saucer under the container. Now that's not so much of a concern if you're keeping these outside. So everything that we're talking about today applies if you don't have any outdoor balcony or patio. You can do all of this indoors as well. We'll talk about sunlight in a minute. But so this applies. So if your plant's indoors, obviously you need a saucer to keep the water from going anywhere. If it's outdoors, you can just water it and let the water drain out if that works for you.
If you have a saucer under an outdoor plant and it fills with water after heavy rain, leave the water in it or drain the water.
Couple reasons to drain it if you can, if it's not too heavy to do that. One is that mosquitoes tend to breed in standing water, so you want to eliminate that if you can. So just kind of, flip it up and tip it over if you can. Also, too, the saucer, depending on the type of material of the saucer, plastic's not so much a concern, but those terracotta clay saucers, those will absorb water, so the water will actually, it'll contain the water, but it'll actually, the saucer will get damp-ish, which if you leave that pot in the same spot for a long time, it could discolor your deck or where you have it. So they make, and I meant to bring these and I forgot to grab them, there's these things called pot feet. Has anyone seen these? They call them pot feet. So you can get them at a garden center and they're made out of clay. And they're little, they're maybe about this long and this big, and they're made out of clay, and they're just like little wedges or feet that you put 3 or 4 of them under the saucer first, then put the saucer on that, so it elevates it up above the deck or the ground surface. So then, even if you get a heavy rain where the saucer overflows, then it'll just all kind of flow around those little pot feet, and they're really inexpensive. So
What are they called?
pot feet.
Pot feet?
F-E-E-T, feet.
Feet.
Yeah, pot feet. Yeah.
A little hard to talk about.
Yeah, and depending on the size of the saucer, is how many of those you need. But I make my own sometimes. Like I bought some pot feet and they ended up shattering. There's something they had gotten damaged or something in transit. So I have cats. So I took 3 empty cat food cans, took the labels off, and just put 3 of those under the saucer, put the saucer on that, and you just want something that's going to elevate it above the ground. So with the labels off, they look fine. You almost can't see them underneath there. So you could use that, or if you have just any kind of small plastic container, you could overturn that and put the saucer right on it. Just make sure it's sturdy. You don't want it to tip over in any kind of high wind or if you accidentally bump it. So the other thing to think about besides drainage holes are aesthetic containers, and this is one of the fun parts of gardening, is not only do we get to choose and design what kind of plants we want, but also the containers too. So you can create a theme of some kind. You can create a look that supports whatever kind of decorating theme you already have in your house or whatever style of house that you have. So up here, upper left, these are some barrels and baskets, actually like some rattan baskets that somebody used and put plants in those inside a plastic pot. That would probably not hold up for a real long time in our climate. That might be a warmer climate. But that could be fun, I think. If you brought them indoors in the winter, you could definitely maybe get a couple seasons out of that. But lots of different types of things. So you can make everything a match. You can make everything coordinate. You can do contrasting things. So just kind of use your desire, your judgment, and your artistic talents to do that. And then budget, as we talked about before, anything that can hold dirt could be a container. So these are just 3 more little cute ideas, just like those plastic boots that somebody did. Somebody did these with some really cute like cowboy hats. So what they probably did, you can't see behind them, but they cut out like part of the hat. So see how I can do this without you being able to see it. So like if this was the cowboy hat, they put this on the wall. So they probably took a plastic pot, screwed that into the fence first, then they cut out part of the brim and put the cowboy hat over that, and then planted the plants there, so the plants are kind of growing up through the cowboy hat. And then over here, these are some cute, very, very dainty little herb garden, so looks like some dill, some chives, maybe some rosemary planted in some old-fashioned teacups. So you could go to an antique store and get cups and saucers. Now those, well, you won't be able to put drainage holes in those, so you have to be really careful with that. You can monitor things like that, just dump out any excess water. The issue with not having drainage holes is that if there is too much water that stays in there, it can rot the roots, and then that affects the health of the plants. So this is the step-by-step. So once you've chosen your container, the next thing that you want to do is add a drainage layer in there, something that's going to keep the dirt and the roots from clogging up the holes. And so there are a few options for that. So if you have any, like I have a gravel driveway, so I have tons of drainage material. However, gravel can be heavy. So other things that you can use, you can actually use these plastic packing peanuts. These tend not to disintegrate very easily at all. So you would place these in the pot just over the holes. And another option too is, I don't know about all of you, I tend to have butter fingers, and so I'm constantly dropping pots, and also like dinner plates. I don't use my good china very often, but my everyday china, I tend to drop those things sometimes. So I save it all. This is a candle holder that I accidentally dropped, and a pot that got tipped over by raccoons off my porch. So these make really, really good protectors for the drainage holes. So you would just put these in here, and I'll walk around with this and show you. So because they're irregular shapes, they're not going to flatten out and block up the holes. So you just kind of put them in there like that. And the idea is just to keep the roots and the dirt from actually clogging in there. And like I said, those circus peanuts would work too. The gravel, all those are. What's that? Those, I probably wouldn't use those if I was planting vegetables, just in case. But for flowers, they're fine. Yeah. And there's actually something called, there's this product called an Upsidaisy, which you can order online, and it's a plastic circle that has drainage holes in it. So if you're using a really big pot and you don't want the expense of filling that whole pot with dirt, like I have a couple of really big urns that came from an estate with like just tons, they're huge. They're so much dirt would have to go in those. You put this circle, and they also make square ones as well. So you would get one that was a good enough size to come down maybe to about here, to where you can still get a good depth for your roots, but you're not spending that money, filling the whole thing up with dirt. So like I said, that works better mostly for really, really big pots. For something like this, probably not.
When I bought plants like hanging baskets, they come with a plastic protector in the bottom, and I've saved those and then use it in my containers for other pots, and just leave it in the bottom like that, and it covers the holes. And you can also just invert one of those pots if it's not flimsy, but the ones like you get hanging baskets in that you don't always need.
Right.
Instead of spending the money for something like that, you can just flip a regular pot, because they're a little usually heavier than that.
Yeah.
But if you can find one that fits, it's a way to save money.
That's a good point. So yeah, anything basically that you could turn upside down. So a lot of times people will use these. Now you're right, these are just to be better for the environment. They're making these out of more flimsy plastic now because the plant doesn't stay in them for long. But if they're fairly sturdy, like if this was a real big container, you could put this in here, or a couple of these in here over the holes, and then it would take up space without you having to put lots and lots of dirt in there.
I've also heard of using empty water bottles, the plastic water bottles.
Oh.
Put them in your pot. They take up space. You use less dirt.
Yep, that's true too. Yeah, and you could probably get a season out of those. Those are being made out of really super thin plastic now too. But yeah, if it's an annual that you'll be letting go at the end of the year, that would probably work fine. Okay. So once you get your drainage layer in there, you'll fill the container up. It depends on how big the container is, but you're going to fill the container up just to the point that it will be at the bottom of your tallest plant. And so then you'll be filling around that. Once you get the container finished, after we add the soil, once you add the plants, you're going to want to keep the top of it down at least an inch from the bottom. So that will keep the water, when you water it, that'll keep the water from flowing out, taking the soil with it. So just keep that in mind when you're filling. And you want to try, like I said, to fill it at the location where you're going to be using it, or bring it up to a sturdy table. If you have a work table, workbench, or a gardening table, then fill it on there so that you can, it's so much harder, you probably know, to reach over and pick something up and move it than it is to put your arms around it when it's already at waist height and then move it safely. So try to employ safe lifting habits when you do this. Then we'll start adding our plants, and we're going to talk a little bit more about how you design a container in a minute. And then labels. So with annuals and perennials, annuals mostly, I usually just kind of keep this sticker in it if I feel like I want to know what it is, or I'll just pull all these out, just keep them like in a drawer in my kitchen, so in case I want to remember what it was, you can see the picture on here and remember. But for perennials, you might want to label them, or just, they can also be cute little labels to make if you're doing like herb gardens. You can go to sometimes, well, when we start having craft fairs again, you'll see people who make cute little garden markers with dill or rosemary or those different kinds of things on there. But these are just different ideas. One as simple as just taking some popsicle sticks and putting some black paint on the end, and then getting some puffy paint and writing the name of whatever it is on there. Somebody took some skewers, looks like some wooden skewers, and they had collected some wine corks, and then took some black puffy paint and wrote the name, the thyme, oregano, basil on those, and stuck it in the skewer, and then put that in the pot. So, I mean, if you just Google creative plant markers, you'll get thousands of ideas. There's some really, really, really cute ones. So then just a quick note about sunlight. So in the northern hemisphere where we live, the sun rises in the east, sets in the west, but it also angles a little bit south. The angle is lower in the winter and higher in the summer. It never goes directly overhead. You have to be on the equator for it to go directly overhead. So it angles a little bit south. So you're going to get direct sun depending on which direction your window or your patio that you're planting on faces. You'll get direct sun all day long if it faces south. You'll get, if it faces east or west, you'll get that at morning or afternoon sun. And then it also doesn't go directly east and directly west. It's sort of a little northeast, then south, and a little northwest. So even if you have plants like my back deck faces north, but I get enough of that early morning sun and late afternoon sun that I can still get full sun plants on that deck even though it faces north. So just kind of experiment with that. The biggest concern is if you're trying to do a totally indoor garden through your windows, then a north-facing window you would need to use shade plants for that because they're not going to get any direct light. So. And then and use that. You probably know this already, but you want to make sure that the ones, if you're doing a combination planter, that all the plants have the same exposure. So these are all full sun plants. So we're going to make sure to let Sally know that when we leave our container. So those should get full sun. So full sun is 6 hours or more of sunlight every day, and then it goes down from there depending on whether it's part sun and part shade, or pretty much the same things. And then even a shade plant doesn't mean no light at all. There's no such thing, and there are very few things that grow in absolute, like mushrooms are the only things that grow in absolutely no light. So even shade plants like hostas will get some at least filtered light during the day. So then you get your plants in there, you're gonna put some fertilizer in there. There's a few different types of fertilizer, granular fertilizers, liquid fertilizers, and then those plant spikes, they make the spikes for different types of plants, whether you're doing house plants or vegetables or flowers. And then watering is something you're really going to have to experiment with because it depends on your sun exposure, it depends on the type of the pot, it depends on how big the pots are. Smaller pots tend to dry out faster. So the best rule of thumb is just to really check it every day. And then of course, you know, you get into the really hot days of August that we just went through, and that's going to dry them out more quickly. So try if you can to check them every day, because it can really be just a matter of one day that you forget and then you lose that plant. That's happened to me a couple times where I've gone away on vacation sometimes in August, and then, you know, the person who was taking care of my garden just missed it by that one day, and it's really hard to bring a plant back from that point. So just check that. Again, those terracotta pots, they're going to dry out more quickly, and hanging baskets can tend to dry out more quickly as well. Although the sphagnum moss that they line those baskets with, that can help retain the moisture. So if it's not lined with that, then you can usually pick some of that up at the garden store. So we'll talk about garden pests. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, you look at that, there's no dirt, there's no dirt. What kind of dirt should you put in?
So good question. The question was what kind of dirt should you put in there? So it depends on what kind of plants.
Fertilizer, and plant. Soil.
Yes.
There's-
It is overwhelming, the number of options and things to do. So ask. I prefer to shop at my garden center. I did go to Home Depot just out of necessity because that's all I had time for. I wanted to wait and get the plants yesterday right before the class, and that was all I had time for. But generally I go to my garden center. They're a little bit more expensive, but I find the quality of plants are better and the people are more knowledgeable. So if you can't immediately figure it out yourself from all the different options, you can just ask. Healthy, cultivated plants will do well with just a very basic potting soil. So this is the mix that I get from Remick, which is where I shop. So, and this has been really good for most. Now I don't do vegetables, so you might get a different mix for vegetables. And I tend to add the fertilizer rather than having the fertilizer in, because the thing with pots is that because we have to water them so frequently and the water drains out, it does tend to flush out any of the nutrients or vitamins that are in the potting mix. So I just prefer to get the regular potting mix and then just add the nutrients when I water, like every other time or every third time, depending on how frequently you're watering. So that's a good question. Thank you. So pests that's another benefit of container gardening. Pests are much more infrequent because we tend to watch them and monitor them more closely, and it's usually, you know, our pots are usually our annuals, so not as much opportunity for pests to come. If you do find that when you're watering, you can kind of check and see what's going on, and some pests, a lot of pests are good. They're friendly. You want to keep them. You know, they're keeping other pests that aren't so good, keeping them away. So if you do develop any kind of issue on a plant, you might want to take a picture of it and take it to your garden center and say, hey, what is this? Is this something I should be concerned about? And they will let you know what the best thing is to do for that. I'm a person who doesn't like to use chemicals or sprays or any of those kinds of things. So if I do get something that's not desirable, I'll try just washing it with water to start with and see if it's sometimes just disturbing them a few times will get them to go away. So then, yeah, just getting a suggestion from a garden center is a really good thing to do. So ordering plants through the mail, some pros and some cons to that. Pros are that you have access to a wider variety of plants than your garden center might carry. So you can get more variety in there, but just monitor your expectations, because the pictures and catalogs are always of these well-established older plants that could be, you know, 2, 3, 4 years old and have taken a lot of time to fill in and grow out. And then you get this little twig in the mail, you know, and so you have to be patient. But again, that could be a way to get some different types of plants. And There are a lot of good, check online, read the reviews online, make sure that it's a reputable company who's been around for a long time. Like places like Wayside Gardens is a good one, Spring Hill Nursery, those are some really good ones. So I want to go through, these are just some arrangements for different types of conditions, but I want to go through this one principle of design, which is called thriller, filler, and spiller. Has anybody heard of that before? So it's a cute little acronym, a way to remember something. So thriller, filler, and spiller. So these are basically refer to three heights or habits of plants, and this is a way that you can make what the human eye is looks at as being like a pleasing arrangement. So your thriller is generally your most showy plant. It's usually the tallest plant in the arrangement. It can be something exotic or it can just be something interesting. I did for my, at home, my 2 urns that I have out front for my thrillers, I did some canna lilies this year, which are really beautiful, kind of a watermelon-y, light reddish pink color. And they got probably this tall, these really neat exotic blooms. So the thriller is the one that you put in first. So this sedum is going to be our thriller in our arrangement. And then the fill, and usually you have one of those depending on the size. If it is a very, very small plant, you could put 2, but usually one thriller. And then your fillers are the medium-sized plants that go in between. So these help to fill out the pot, hence the name, and then cover up a little bit of the bottom part of your thriller, which may not be so showy, and it just kind of fills out the plant. So the number of these, again, is going to depend on the size of your container. I kind of estimated 2 for our container. They don't have to be the same. You could put 2 or 3 different kinds of fillers in if you wanted to. And then the spiller is the one that spills over the edge of the plant, and that softens the edges of the container and helps to kind of bring your eye. So your eye kind of does this natural thing where it starts at the top of the thriller, kind of comes down, and then the spiller kind of helps to draw the eye down to the table or the ground. And that's a technique that interior decorators use, like decorating your nightstand next to your table. You might have like a tall lamp, and then that's kind of like your thriller. And then you might have maybe a vase or 2 medium height, and then you might have like a book or a clock at the bottom. So just different varying heights. It looks more aesthetically pleasing to the human eye than to have everything one level. And then with that, you can experiment then with color. So it took me a little while to find, because there's not a big selection right now. So I was trying to find things that were all sun and that went well together. So your color wheel handout, you can look at this. These are based on the psychology of color, again, how the human eye perceives color and what we find to be pleasing. So this can help you to choose different plants, what colors go together and why. So I found ones that seem to repeat the pinks, got a little bit of pink in that guy that showed up here, and then the yellow showed up here. So it seemed like all of these things kind of traveled well together. So let's plant our plants. So we're going to
Tell them what your background is before we started this.
Oh, yeah.
She's got a really
yeah.
knowledgeable background.
My first career, it's kind of one of those things you can take the girl out, but not take it out of the girl. So I was an architect and interior decorator for 20 years before starting my business, working with seniors. I work with children. I work with folks with disabilities, and just teach all kinds of fun stuff. So a lot of my knowledge has translated to that. So we're starting with our pot, with our drainage holes in our pot. And we use some of these. Yes, thank you. So I'm just going to arrange these guys a little bit over the
Excuse me, thank you.
Oh, thank you, thank you. And normally, I would have everybody come up here and look and gather and all of that. I think we have to be careful with, yeah. Oh, do you have to go too?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks for coming.
Okay. Yeah, it got to be really hot today.
Yeah.
I think it was going to be so bad.
Okay, so just kind of covered over that. Since we have these peanuts, I'll just put these in here just to take up a little bit of space. Sprinkle those guys in there. And then I'm going to fill it up. So you usually put your thriller in first, and the thriller can go either in the middle of the pot, or it can go back to in one of the corners or to the side. So it just kind of depends. If you were doing a really big pot that was going to be outside and maybe people could see it from several different angles, then you might put the thriller in the middle and put a bunch of fillers and spillers around that. But in this case, I'm going to put it towards the back. So let me put on my gloves. How are we doing on time?
I have about 10 to 2.
Okay. Thank you. These I found at Tuesday morning the other day. I love these. I go through so many gloves, and it's such a shame because you know what always goes first? Seems to be the first two fingers. And I will do things like I'll get duct tape and because the whole glove is fine, you know, and I'm trying to save the glove. But so these plastic coated ones seem to be lasting at least a bit longer than just the fabric ones. I think these were $3 or $4 at Tuesday morning, so not bad.
Where did you find it Tuesday morning it was open?
Oh, where was I?
The one here.
Solon
Yeah.
closed. Yeah, Solon closed.
Yeah, the one in Cleveland Heights closed as well. I forget where I was. I was.
There's one
off
on
of Wilson
Wilson Mills.
Okay.
In,
Okay.
I don't know if that's
Yeah.
Across from.
No, I was more down like where was I? I was like down in Brooklyn or someplace like that. Yeah. So if the bag's light enough, you can pick it up and just pour it in, or I just use one of these old pots just to sprinkle. And as you're doing this, you just want to be careful not to dislodge those pieces that we put over the hole.
What makes a potting soda a potting soda?
There are a couple things, like this has some other things added to it, so let me bring this around. I think this probably has a little bit of peat moss. It's got this vermiculite in it, so it helps.
It's very light.
It's very light, yep, so it helps a lot with drainage. And, yep. So, I don't think it says in here. No, you just trust them. It doesn't say what it is. You just trust me, don't protect that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that looks good.
All right, so I'm gonna see how we're doing with. We should hold this and just make sure it doesn't. Yeah, Nancy's my lovely assistant. I'm gonna shuffle that around a little bit, and then I'm just gonna test. So you probably know, but you want to be really, really careful removing these guys from the pot so that you don't look. When you yank them up like this, sometimes if they're delicate stems, they can break. This one, these are pretty sturdy stems, but this is also kind of a succulent too, which tends to break early. So you kind of do this with your hand, come through, and then turn it over. You have the best luck. So just squeeze a tad to use it. Oh, thanks. Yeah.
Okay.
This, I'm gonna put this a little towards.
Do you need to separate those roots?
Yeah, I want to take a look at those. So if it really did, this one doesn't look bad. If you can see a lot of roots winding around and you see a lot of them, then that's the indication that it's root bound, but this one looks fine. So it looks like we can put a little more soil under this guy. Because like I said, you want this top to be, we're going to put a little more fresh soil over the top, but you want it to be about an inch, a little more. Okay. There we go. That's good. And then you could, these look like, those look like they're about the same height. So why don't we pour the first one in here? I kind of shuffle around just to get the soil settled a little bit, just in case there are any air pockets or anything like that that tends to kind of shift it down a little bit. If you would hold this guy, and then we'll get these medium fillers out. Little stone crack. I believe is what it's called. And these look real good too. Okay. This looks real good too in terms of the roots. I'm gonna put this one over to the.
When you have a plant like that, would you ever separate them before you plant them?
I usually don't. I usually buy the size that I need, so I usually don't. But you could, depending on the plant, you could. Here's
Good. I'm so used to leaning until I didn't even know I was leaning.
I saw you in the.
I was leaning. I'm so into
And
it.
then as you're putting these in here, you kind of want to spin them to get the, kind of the best biggest forward. This one on the left seems to have a lot more zooms than this one, but it's gonna be really pretty.
Yeah, sure.
So these are both in the same family, but both in the sedum family, but totally different look. And then this one is more of a succulent. Where's
Oh, they're right there, Judith.
oh, okay.
So
So here, this one, oh, this one's ice
They look
plant.
good. Did you
So
get
they're
those
gonna-
on sale?
These three were on sale. These were 4 for 12, or 3 for $12.
Okay.
And this one I think was $9. And this time it'll. If you could hold that up. Yeah, thanks. Boy, this is nice having help. We don't often have help, do we? Alright, this
I'm
one
learning
we're
so
just
much. I never did anything like this before. That's awesome.
Careful, just gotta keep it maybe there's underneath. So here's an example where we can see the roots. So in this case, I would probably, this one isn't too bad, but I would probably squish a little bit to like loosen these roots a little bit. Another thing that you can do is if you have a fork or a garden trowel, sometimes you can just kind of tap around the sides to loosen it up a bit. This I think will be absolutely fine. There we go. That looks like that filled out really nicely.
Yeah, that looks really nice.
And yeah, and then yeah, you're just gonna, if you want to use the smaller one, if that's
Now, these
easier.
are all perennials, right?
No, these are, well, wait a second.
Move your
These
chair
are,
up high this time.
actually, you're right. This is,
I've been in the,
I think these three are perennials
Right.
because that's why they were on sale. Oh, and this, the ice plant is as well. So yeah, Sally, this is a,
there you go.
yeah, this could, you could technically leave this outside and get it out. Or, if you were doing the Julian earlier, you could leave them in a container and then maybe put them in the yard later for winter, so.
That looks really good.
We want to keep it, no, yeah, we want to keep it lower, so
You think it's
that,
missing something, huh?
yeah.
They fill in. Like I have, see that pink thing? Mine at home, because I use them in my summer pots. They're just huge.
Huge
They're
now,
unbelievable, yeah.
They really spread out.
Yeah.
Well, that looks really good.
And then I'm just gonna, yeah, so now we're gonna add some, sorry, I held that up pretty high. So I just have this liquid plant food at home.
You know, you get dirty when you're working, you're playing around with dirt. Dirt and water, you're going to get some on.
this
you.
today. I got
Yeah.
a feeling. So the next for us.
Thank you, this was
Thank
great.
you, thanks for coming.
Yeah, that's really good.
So this one, a quarter of a cup, this is a 2-quart container, so a quarter of a cup. Yeah, just in case, thank you, yeah.
I know, winter is like, I'm done watering by this time of year. I spend the whole summer watering.
Oh my gosh.
My husband hit it.
And they were frozen, so
Yeah,
did
they were like wet and
Oh dear.
very, the reddish got all over.
Oh gosh. Are you gonna be able to clean the rug?
Yeah, I would say. Done. Does everything.
Oh, there you go. Just gonna check and see if we need to add little, you can always get in between these round, bases, you always get these little awkward
So you're gonna leave that for here, for outside.
Yeah,
So,
it's full sun, right?
what are they gonna have to do in the winter? They cover it up with some lawn?
Well,
What do they do?
here's the thing. So even if these were annuals, like these, the bees like them.
Yeah.
Yeah, the bees love these.
Yeah.
Oh, well, there you go.
So that's one nice thing is that if you have an annual arrangement that you really like, you could bring it into your house over the winter and put it out again. I did that for the first time this year because I planted this really, really pretty impatiens that I'd never seen this color before. It was kind of a pinkish apricot color, and it got huge. It was this big, the spread. And I planted it with Dusty Miller. I don't know if you know what that is. It's kind of an icy blue foliage, and it was just lovely. And I was like, oh, I hate to see this die. So I said, well, I'm going to try it. And I brought it in my dining room and kept it in a sunny window.
Oh,
And it got just as beautiful this year as it was last
Really?
year when I put it back out. Yeah. So,
hmm.
okay. Water this guy.
This is a new thing for me.
Me
Wow.
too.
Oh, no.
Well, enjoy and really take advantage of a garden center, even if you might have
Yeah.
to drive a little way to get there. The people are very knowledgeable and very helpful. I even had a question about a big overgrown bush that was in my yard that I didn't know much about it, and the guy right off the bat, I didn't even know what it was
Did you take a
named. I
picture
showed
of
him a
it? 'Cause I
picture.
take a picture whenever.
Yeah, I showed him a picture.
Yeah, yeah.
And he knew what it was
Yeah.
and told me what to do. So great.
Well, that looks really good. I think I got a new pot.
Yeah.
You know, talking about impatiens, I had pots and some were doing absolutely beautiful. All of a sudden, all the flowers were gone. I had to dig all of them
I
out.
don't know.
And I had no idea why. Something died.
Yeah. Oh. And that's the tough thing too. That's another reason why I like to buy at a garden center rather than like Lowe's or Home Depot, because you don't know if they're diseased or not.
Yeah.
You know, and
The
sometimes
garden center was.
they get those plants sometimes from overseas, and you don't know like what they're bringing
Fertilizer
in.
and stuff you putting on that thing. Yeah, that's why I go to
Right.
Katiga.
And this is the time to get pottery. Everybody's pottery is like 50% off or more. So. Mhm.
I bought those pots like we were saying last year. They're tall for my front porch, and then they had the square thing, like so you didn't have to put dirt all the
Oh,
way down.
okay.
But the one thing I noticed was halfway through the thing tipped, so and my one plant died and the other one was fine on the other
Yeah.
side. So I had to take it all out.
Sally, this is a full
That
sun
looks
container.
really
So where do
nice.
you think you might want it?
Take a picture of these.
Is this south? I think.
Yes.
Wait, which way is south?
I mean, the full sun, this is actually south here.
South. Okay.
Yes.
So yeah, if I put it like.
Put it over here. Well, right now it's a mess here.
Okay.
And I was even thinking about, I have an event on Monday, luncheon, maybe I'll raffle it off. Or
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah, that's beautiful, Judith.
Well, I'll put it. Do you think it's like right here with
Yeah,
you?
just put it there and I'll move it around once I go to the table back.
Okay.
Let me go shut you down. Here, I'm still live on YouTube.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we tape this so that way you can watch it again.
Oh,
On
that's nice.
YouTube. Now, let me go shut this down first.
Okay.
Boy, that was
That came out nice, didn't it?
Yeah.
This will fill out more in the middle too.
Of course, you have to come back every day.
Hey, Judith, let me take your picture if you don't mind, 'cause I'll put it on our
Oh,
favorite
okay.
place thing.
Yes, and thanks
again.
again to Nancy and Home Watch Caregivers for making this class possible.
that was
Yeah,
great.
thank you.
It looks,
for
oh my
coming,
gosh,
ladies.
it looks so good.
Yeah.
It looks so nice.
Okay, ready,
Okay.
Judith?
Well, I'm glad I learned something about that. That looks nice.
Right.